get some reaction now. Lord Glasman is joining us to give his assessment, a long-time observer and critic occasionally of the Labour Party. But first, I just wanted to get your reaction to what we've been hearing on the financial front about the husbandry of UK PLC and the fact the Bank of England's undertaken these emergency measures.
Well, this is just the unravelling that really begun in 2008. As Liam mentioned, they went to quantitative easing, which always reminded me of a sort of high-end laxative rather than an economic measure, but essentially meant that the Bank of England just produced more and more virtual money. And now the essential problems with our productive capacity, which were highlighted during COVID, are all coming to the fore. So essentially the Conservative government have completely reneged on their election manifesto. There's no levelling up anymore. There's no productivity anymore. There's no agenda for vocational training anymore. And they've reverted to their natural position, which is what you might say free market capitalism. And it's going to fail.
Yeah.
So Labour has also made some promises, but they're also based on borrowing. Now, explain this to me. You are a Labour peer, so the Labour Party have said this is reckless, so they want to get rid and they would reverse that 45p tax rate, but not to get down borrowing, to spend that on things like providing breakfast for primary school children. So how can one be reckless, but the same amount of money used for a different purpose not be reckless?
Yeah, well, that's the contradiction that faces Labour at the moment, is trying to simultaneously be radical and quite fiscally conservative. The reality is that all over the Western world, all over Europe and the United States, ever since the financial crash and intensified during COVID, there has been a new type of monetary policy that they've pursued, which involves huge amounts of public debt. So Britain is not particularly exposed in that regard, I think. But there certainly needs to be a recognition that monetary and fiscal policy has reached a certain limit. And we've got to go actually into the economy and start having an industrial strategy, Gloria. That's the fundamental political battle now.
And all this sort of economic financial uncertainty politically, given Labour an open goal, do you think Sir Keir Starmer put the ball in the back of the net yesterday on this?
Well, I think he's put the ball on the penalty spot. I don't know if he's actually scored yet, and that's the crucial thing. Right. Labour has to actually develop a constructive policy that fills in the spaces that the Conservative couldn't fill. So after we left the European Union, we've left the constraints of what we might say Lisbon and Maastricht, which mean we weren't allowed to have a competition policy, we weren't allowed to have an industrial strategy, we couldn't support industries. And now it's firmly on the government, who have absolutely no clue how to shape and define our economic future. And it's got to involve workers on boards, it's got to involve regional banks, so that all the deprived areas have some access to capital. So I think we've got we've won a penalty, but we're yet to score.
You have written and spoken extensively about the need for the Labour Party to reconnect with its working class base, those voters who deserted them at the last election. In fact, you've just got a new book out in the last week. Do you think it is making that connection? Because the difficulty is when we see 17-point opinion poll leads for Labour, we have no idea what the opinion poll lead is in those red wall seats which they need to regain to form a government. National poll leads mean nothing in this context.
No, they don't, and we've got to look at that. So the huge rupture, Gloria, which you well know, having been an MP for those seats, is very ruptured. It's so they're very disillusioned with the Conservatives. There's still a lingering affection for Boris, actually, in those areas, and they think there's been a kind of coup against them by the city, by the money people who are trying to reassert a kind of Thatcherism, which obviously destroyed and decimated their lives for all those years. So Labour has yet to really put together that policy. And as I say, it's got to involve training skilled workers so that workers in this country can fulfil the needs. I mean, the government have also said they're going to increase immigration. That's part of their policy in order to deal with this crisis. So it's a perfect moment for Labour to actually have a pro-worker industrial strategy.
OK, so let's just sum all this up as you assess what's happening both in Liverpool, what's about to happen in Birmingham with the Tory party conference, and, of course, what's happening on the financial markets and the economy. Will Labour win that next general election?
Well, now it's up to Labour. The ball's on the spot. and he's got a score. Everything is in place. The whole thing is in place. If you think of Labour over a century, what would you say instinctively? You'd say a bigger role for the state in the economy, a bigger role for Labour in the governance of that economy, and an improvement of the places that poor people live. This is the moment that we're in. Only Labour can deliver it, and it's up to Labour to move into that space.